way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the Descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.
Welcome everyone to the reading today of 4th of July. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you. I think this is like the 3rd or 4th time. I can't remember. I get lost. Of doing something like this on what some people call 4th of July. For those that celebrate 4th of July, aka Independence Day, I think we all should, but if you don't, that's up to you. It's your right. All right, so let's get into it. Today, what up, bro? Appreciate you as always for tuning in, joining in, staying informed, and getting involved, taking this information out to the community, your community, to making sure that we get repaired. All right, here we go. All right, so today we're going to be talking about a couple things. We're going to be reading our good brother, good ancestor, Frederick Douglass, finding out who the Whig Party is, and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, Black American descendants, and the dual relationship. Another 4th of July history lesson. So hopefully everyone can hear me. I don't know why I think the music is not too loud. I'm just going to do this test real quick just to make sure I can hear the music, and I'll turn it down. Okay, cool. Just doing a test real quick. All right, cool. It's good morning. Good morning. Everyone's having a wonderful day. Yes, salutations to everyone. All right. And if you haven't had a chance, please go ahead and pre-order the Reparations Now documentary at reparationsnowdoc.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. Available June 19th, 2023. Happy Juneteenth. Yes, I'm up here clicking buttons. Wrong one. I actually meant to put this one up. But it's all good. Yeah, reparationsnowdoc.com. Please go and support us there. I think maybe next month we'll probably start putting up more additional footage up there for the fam to go check out. But I think it's up at Tubi, so if you want it, you do have access to Tubi. You can go there, but you can check out the documentary at reparationsnowdoc.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. And also, if you want to listen to some tunes, you can go to obsidiandiet.com, listen to the Welcome to California in the building. Go hit that QR code. All right. And so, yes. Let's start getting into it. Oh, wonderful. Okay, everything is good. Music balance. All right, perfect. Thank you, family, for the feedback on that, because it's always good. Sometimes, you're reading or you're doing stuff and you just don't know if everything's coming through okay. And remember, just real quick before we get started, somebody, and shout out, I can't remember the brother and sister's name, who came up to me during the last California Reparations Task Force hearing. For those who haven't been paying attention on this platform, was doing some Python programming tutorials on here, and I thought, nobody was paying attention because I wasn't getting any feedback. And this young sister came up to me and was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're doing the tutorials and so forth." I was like, "What?" Like, you're actually looking at it? Yeah. So shout out, man. Shout out to the family. I appreciate y'all as always. All right. So let's get into it. I am gonna go ahead and actually probably read the Frederick Douglass "What to the Slave Is the 4th of July" first, because it's a pretty lengthy read, and then we'll get into the Whig Party and the 1850 Slave Act. So we're gonna go ahead and start out with the ancestor first. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. And if there's some other history lessons that we should know, please put it in the chat regarding 4th of July. All right, hope everyone can see the screen. Let me blow it up just a tad bit. This is actually my first time reading this. At least out loud. I think I may have read it on my own time, but not out loud. So, all right, let's. I'm gonna turn my volume up just a tad bit on my end, make sure I can hear everything. Okay, here we go. All right, so 1852, Frederick Douglass. What to the Slave is the 4th of July. On July 5th, 1852, Frederick Douglass was invited to address the citizens of his hometown, Rochester, New York. Whatever the expectations of his audience on the 76th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Douglass used the occasion not to celebrate the nation's triumphs, but to remind all of its continuing enslavement of millions of people. Douglas's speech appears below. Mr. President, friends and fellow citizens, he who could address this audience without a quelling sensation has stronger nerves than I have. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly, nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. A feeling has crept over me, quite unfavorable to the exercise of my limited powers of speech. The task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I know that apologies of this sort are generally considered flat and unmeaning. I trust, however, that mine will not be considered. Should I seem at ease, my appearance would much misrepresent me. The little experience I have had in addressing public meetings in country schoolhouses avails me nothing on the present occasion. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way, for it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with this presence. But neither their familiar faces, nor the perfect gauge I think I have of Corinthian Hall seems to free me from embarrassment. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude. You will not, therefore, be surprised if in what I have to say, I invent no elaborate preparation, nor grace my speech with any high-sounding exordium. With little experience and with less learning, I have been able to throw my thoughts hastily and imperfectly together, and thrusting to your patience and generous indulgence, I will proceed to lay them before you. This, for the purpose of the celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance, and to the signs and to the wonders associated with that act and that day. The celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 70 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men. But nations number their years by thousands. According to the fact you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon. The eye of the reformer is met with angry flashes, portending disastrous times, but his heart may well beat lighter at the thought that America is young, and that she is still in the impressible stage of her existence. May he not hope that high lessons of wisdom, of justice, and of truth will yet give direction to her destiny. Were the nation older, the patriot's heart might be sadder, and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be shrouded in gloom, and the hope of its prophets go out in sorrow. There is consolation in the thought that America is young. Great streams are not easily turned from channels worn deep in the course of ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with their mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and fury and bear away on their angry waves, the accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. They, however, gradually flow back to the same old channel and flow on as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch and the unsightly rock, to howl in the abyss sweeping wind the sad tale of departed glory. As with rivers, so with nations. Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and the title of your, quote, sovereign people, end quote, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as a home government and England as a fatherland. This home government, you know, although a considerable distance from your home, did, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, impose upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the fashionable idea this day of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far in their excitement as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Such a declaration of agreement on my part would not be worth much to anybody. It would certainly prove nothing as to what part I may have taken had I lived during the great controversy of 1776. To say now that America was right and England wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say it. The dastard, not less than the noble brave, can flippantly descant on the tyranny of England towards the American colonies. It is fashionable to do so, but there was a time when to pronounce against England and in favor of the cause of the colonies tried men's souls. They who did so were counted in their day plotters of mischief, agitators and rebels, dangerous men. To side with the right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the oppressed against the oppressor. Here lies the merit, and the one which of all others seems unfashionable in our day. The cause of liberty may be stabled by the men who glory in the deeds of your fathers, but to proceed. Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. Their conduct was wholly unacceptable. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn, yet they persevered. They were not the men to look back. As the sheet anchor takes a firmer hold when the ship is tossed by the storm, so did the cause of your fathers grow stronger, as it breasted the chilling blast of kingly displeasure. The greatest and best of British statesmen admitted its justice. And the loftiest eloquence of the British Senate came to its support. But with that blindness which seems to be the unvarying characteristic of tyrants, since Pharaoh and his hosts were drowned in the Red Sea, the British government persisted in the exactions complained of. The madness of this course, we believe, is admitted now, even by England, but we fear the lesson is wholly lost on our present ruler. Oppression makes a wise man mad, Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent, as has been intimidated of that day, were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived then, had lived before, and will probably ever have a place on this planet, in their course in respect to any great change. No matter how great the good to be attained or the wrong to be redressed by it, may be calculated with as much precision as can be the course of the stars. They hate all changes, but silver, gold, and copper change of this sort of change they are always strongly in favor. These people were called Tories in the days of your fathers, and the appellation probably conveyed the same idea that is meant by a more modern, though a somewhat less euphonious term, which we often find in our papers, applied to some of our old politicians. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution, and as we seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal to this, it may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. We solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution, they succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is a great fact in your nation's history, the very ring, bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. From the ground top of your ship of state, dark and threatening clouds may be seen. Heavy billows like mountains in the distance disclose to the leeward huge forms of flinty rocks. That bold drawn, that chain broken, and all is lost. Cling to this day, cling to it and its principles, with the grasp of a storm-tossed mariner to a spar at midnight. The coming into being of a nation in any circumstances is an interesting event, but besides general considerations, there were peculiar circumstances which make the advent of this republic an event of special attractiveness. The whole scene, as I look back to it, was simple, dignified, and sublime. The population of the country at the time stood at the insignificant number of 3 millions. The country was poor in the The country was poor in the munitions of war. The population was weak and scattered, and the country a wilderness unsubdued. There were then no means of concert and combination such as exists now. Neither steam nor lightning had then been reduced to order and discipline. From the Potomac to the Delaware was a journey of many days. Under these and innumerable other disadvantages, your fathers declared for liberty and independence and triumphed. Fellow citizens, I'm not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to rise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate the great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interests, and though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that it is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but that they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. They seized upon internal principles and set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them. Fully appreciating the hardships to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to heaven to attest their sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of his republic, did most deliberately under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism, and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. Banners and pennants wave exultantly on the breeze. The din of the business, too, is hushed. Even Mammon seems to have quitted his grasp on this day. The ear-piercing fife and the stirring drum unite their accents with the ascending peal of 1,000 church bells. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day. While the quick martial tramp of a great and multitudinous nation, echoed back by all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, bespeak the occasion one of thrilling and universal interest, nation's jubilee. Friends and citizens, I need not enter further into the causes which led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You can instruct me in regard to them. That is a branch of knowledge in which you feel perhaps a much deeper interest than your speaker. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as similar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I remember also that as a people, Americans are remarkably familiar with all facts which make in their own favor. This is esteemed by some as a national trait, perhaps a national weakness. It is a fact that whatever makes for the wealth or for the reputation of Americans and can be had cheap will be found by Americans. I shall not be charged with slandering Americans if I say I think the American side of any question may be safely left in American hands. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen whose claim to have been regularly descended will be less likely to be disputed less likely to be disputed than mine. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever-living now. Trust no further, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God overhead. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. To all inspiring motives, to noble deeds, which can be gained from the past, we are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You lived and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence. Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom eulogize the wisdom and virtues of their fathers, but to excuse some folly or wickedness of their own. This truth is not a doubtful one. There are illustrations of it near and remote, ancient and modern. It was fashionable hundreds of years ago for the children of Jacob to boast, "We have," quote, "Abraham to our father," end quote, when they had long lost Abraham's father and spirit. That people contented themselves under the shadow of Abraham's great name, while they repudiated the deeds which made his name great. Need I remind you that a similar thing is being done all over this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the people who built the tombs of the prophets and garnished the sepulchres of the righteous? Washington could not die till he had broken the chains of his slaves. Yet his monument is built up by the price of human blood, and the traitors in the bodies and souls of men shout, "We have Washington to our father." Alas, that it should be so, yet so it is. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? And that's interjection here. That's a question for those that are just listening and aren't actually looking. Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee? When the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs, when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs, I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame man leap as in heart. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. All right, let's continue. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, luring up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrecoverable ruin. I can today take up the plaintive lament of a peeled and woe-smitten people. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst of thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they who wasted us required us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of some sorrow this day, May my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking. It would not make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to be professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. All right, I gotta repeat that one more time in a little introduction. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Let's continue. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slave holder shall not confess to be right and just. But I fancy I hear some one of my audience say, it is just in the circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. Wow, I'm sorry, I gotta repeat that one more time. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, in committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to punishment of death. Boom. I'll repeat that one more time. Great ancestor speaking some gems. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl, shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, there will I argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manners of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom? Speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively. To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them from their liberty, to work with them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons? All right, sorry, just had to clear my throat real quick. Let me clear my throat. All right, let's get back to it. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought that which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition that they may, I cannot? The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted, impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings. Interjections, I was going to say miss Thanksgivings, but let's continue. With all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, and thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and the despotisms of the old world, travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. America reigns without a rival. Take the American slave trade, which we were told by the papers especially prosperous just now. Ex-Senator Benton tells us that the price of men was never higher than now. He mentions the fact to show that slavery is no danger. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institution. It is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy, and millions are pocketed every year by dealers in this horrid traffic. In several states, this trade is the chief source of wealth. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called in contradistinction to this foreign slave trade, the internal slave trade. It is probably called so too in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. The trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy. It has been denounced with burning words from the high places of the nation as an exacerbable traffic. To arrest it, to put an end to it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhumane traffic. Opposed alike to the laws of God and of man, the duty to extirpate, and to destroy it is admitted even by our doctors of divinity. In order to put an end to it, some of these last have consented that their colored brethren, nominally free, should leave this country and establish themselves on the western coast of Africa. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable. The men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable. Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what it is, a swine drover? I will show you a drover. I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers, armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These stretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the human wretch who drives him. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with locks thinned and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother, whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed and faltered under the weight of her children and her chains. That gash on her shoulders tells her to move on. Follow the drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from that scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States. I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. When a child, my soul was often pierced with a sense of its horrors. I lived in Philpott Street, Phil's Point, Baltimore, and have watched from the wharves. The slave ships in the basin anchored from the shore, with their cargoes of human flesh, waiting for favorable winds to waft them from the Chesapeake. There was, at that time, a grand slave mart kept at the head of Pratt Street by Austin Woldfolk. His agents were sent into every town and county in Maryland, announcing their arrival through the papers and on flaming handbills headed, quote, "Cash for Negroes." These men were generally well-dressed men and very captivating in their manners, ever ready to drink, to treat, and to gamble. The fate of many a slave has depended upon the turn of a single card. In many, a child has been snatched from the arms of its mother by bargains arranged in a state of brutal drunkenness. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number have been collected there, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night, for since the anti-slavery agitation, a certain caution is observed. All right, let's continue. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have been often aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chain gangs that pass our door. The anguish of my boyish heart was intense, and I was often consoled when speaking to my mistress in the morning, to hear her say that the custom was very wicked and that she hated to hear the rattle of the chains and the heart-rending cries. I was glad to find one who sympathized with me in my horror. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight. Is this the land of your fathers loved, the freedom which they toiled to win? Is this the earth wherein they moved? Are these the graves they slumber in? But I still more inhuman, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. By that act, Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men and women and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. I know there's some people out there talking about the North wasn't involved in no slave trade. I know for those who are up on history, that's not true, but let's speak the words of the ancestor, okay? Who's living at this time. By that act, Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States. Interjection later on would include California. Fugitive Slave Act 1852, which we'll be reading the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 later on. That was an interjection. Let's continue. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not scared. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad republican domain is hunting ground for men, not for thieves and robbers, enemies of society merely, but for men guilty of no crime. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state, your lords, nobles, and ecclesiastics ecclesiastics enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and, without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these men have had wives and children dependent on them for bread, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all rights in this republic. The rights of God included for black men, there are neither law, justice, humanity, not religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any two villains insufficient under this hell black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian American, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding in the case of a man's liberty to hear only his accusers. In glaring violation of justice and shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation. I doubt if there be another nation on the globe having the brass and the baseness to put such a law on the statute book. If any man in this assembly thinks differently from me in this matter and feels able to disprove my statements, I will gladly confront him at any suitable time and place he may select. I take this law to be one of the grossest infringements of Christian liberty. And if the churches and ministers of our country were not stupidly blind or most wickedly indifferent, they too would so regard it. At the very moment that they are thanking God for the enjoyment of civil and religious liberty and for the right to worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience, they are utterly silent in respect to a law which robs religion of its chief significance and makes it utterly worthless to a world lying in wickedness. Did this law concern the mint, anise, and cumin? Abridge the fight to sing psalms, to partake of the sacrament, or to engage in any of the ceremonies of religion, it would be smitten by the thunder of 1,000 pulpits. A general shout would go up from the church demanding repeal, repeal, instant repeal. And it would go hard with the politician who presumed to solicit the votes of the people without inscribing this motto on his banner. Further, if this demand were not complied with, another Scotland would be added to the history of religious liberty, and the stern old Covenanters would be thrown into the shade. A John Knox would be seen at every church door and heard from every pulpit, and Fillmore would have no more quarter than was shown by Knox to the beautiful but treacherous Queen Mary of Scotland. The fact that the church of our country, with fractional exceptions, does not esteem the fugitive slave law as a declaration of war against religious liberty implies that that church regards religion simply as a form of worship, an empty ceremony, and not a vital principle. I'm going to repeat that again. The fugitive slave law as a declaration of war against religious liberty implies that the church regards religion simply as a form of worship, an empty ceremony, and not a vital principle. Let that sink in. Let's continue. Requiring active benevolence, justice, love, and goodwill towards man. It esteems sacrifice above mercy, psalm singing above right doing, solemn meetings of practical righteousness. A worship that can be conducted by persons who refuse to give shelter to the houseless, to give bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked, and who enjoin obedience to a law forbidding these acts of mercy, is a curse, not a blessing to mankind. The Bible addresses all such persons as scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites who pay the tithe of mint, anise, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. But the church of this country is not only indifferent to the wrongs of thy slave, it actually takes sides with the oppressors. It has made itself the bulwark of American slavery and the shield of American slave hunters. Many of its most eloquent divines, who stand as the very lights of the church, have shamelessly given the sanction of religion and the Bible to the whole slave system. They have taught that man may properly be a slave, that the relation of slave and slave is ordained of God, that to send back an escaped bondman to his master is clearly the duty of all the followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, and this horrible blasphemy is palmed off upon the world of Christianity. For my part, I would say welcome infidelity, welcome atheism, welcome anything in the preference to the gospel as preached by those divines. They convert the very name of religion into an engine of tyranny and barbarous cruelty and serve to confirm more infidels in this age than all the infidel writings of Thomas Paine, Voltaire, and Bolingbroke, but together have done. These ministers make religion a cold and flinty-hearted thing, having neither principles of right action nor bowels of compassion. They strip the love of God of its beauty and leave the throng of religion a huge, horrible, and repulsive form. It is a religion for oppressors, tyrants, man-stealers, and thugs. It is not the pure and undefiled religion which is from above, and which is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, but a religion which favors the rich against the poor, which exalts the proud above the humble, which divides mankind into two classes, tyrants and slaves, which says to the man in the chains, which says to the man in chains, stay there, and to the oppressor, oppress on. It is a religion which may be professed and enjoyed by all the robbers and enslavers of mankind. It makes God a respecter of persons, denies the falsehood of race, and tramples in the dust the great truth of the brotherhood of man. All this we affirm to be true of the popular church and the popular worship of our land and nation, a religion, a church, and a worship which, on the authority of inspired wisdom, we pronounce to be an abomination in the sight of God. In the language of Isaiah, the American church might be well addressed. Oh, sorry, I just had to, let me just take a quick pause real quick. All right, let's continue. Bring no more vain oblations and since is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are trouble to me. I am weary to bear them, and when we spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when ye make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Cease to do evil. Learn to do well. Seek judgment. Relieve the oppressed. Judge for the fatherless. Plead for the widow. The American church is guilty when viewed in connection with what it is doing to uphold slavery, but it is superlatively guilty when viewed in connection with its ability to abolish slavery. I'm going to repeat that again. The American church is guilty when viewed in connection with what it's doing to uphold slavery, but it is superlatively guilty when viewed in connection with its ability to abolish slavery. All right, let's go. The sin of which it is guilty is one of omission as well as of commission. Albert Barnes but uttered what the common sense of every man at all observant of the actual state of the case will receive as truth when he declared that, quote, there is no power out of the church that could sustain slavery an hour if it were not sustained in it, end quote. Let the religious press, the pulpit, the Sunday school, the conference meeting, the great ecclesiastical, missionary, Bible, and tract associations of the land array their immense powers against slavery and slave holding, and the whole system of crime and blood would be scattered to the winds, and that they do not do this involves them in the most awful responsibility of which the mind can conceive. In prosecuting the anti-slavery enterprise, we have been asked to spare the church, to spare the ministry, but how, we speak, could such a thing be done? We are met, we are met on the threshold of our efforts for the redemption of the slave by the church and the ministry of the country, in battle arrayed against us, and we are compelled to fight or flee. From what quarter, I beg to know, has proceeded a fire so deadly upon our ranks during the last 2 years as from the northern pulpit? As the champions of oppressors, the chosen men of American theology have appeared, men honored for their so-called piety and their real learning. The Lords of Buffalo, the Springs of New York, the Lathrops of Auburn, the Coxes and Spencers of Brooklyn, the Ganetts and Sharps of Boston, the Deweys of Washington, and other great religious lights of the land have, in utter denial of the authority of him, by whom the professed to he called to the ministry, deliberately taught us against example, or the Hebrews against the remonstrance of the apostles, as they teach that we ought to obey man's law before the law of God. My spirit wearies of such blasphemy, and how such men can be supported as the standing types and representatives of Jesus Christ is a mystery which I had leave others to penetrate. In speaking of the American church, however, let it be distinctly understood that I mean the great mass of the religious organizations of our land. There are exceptions, and I thank God that there are. Noble men may be found scattered all over these northern states, of whom Henry Ward Bircher of Brooklyn, Samuel J. May of Syracuse, and my esteemed friend Reverend R.R. Raymond on the platform are shining examples. And let me say further, that upon these men lies the duty to inspire our ranks with high religious faith and zeal, and to cheer us on in the great mission of the slave's redemption from his chains. One is struck with the difference between the attitude of the American church towards the anti-slavery movement and that occupied by the churches in England towards a similar movement in that country. There, the church, true to its mission of ameliorating, elevating, and improving the condition of mankind, came forward promptly, bound up the wounds of the West Indian slave, and restored him to his liberty. There, the question of emancipation was a highly religious question. It was demanded in the name of humanity and according to the law of the living God. The Sharps, the Clarksons, the Wilberforces, the Buxtons, and the Burchells and the Nibs were alike famous for their piety and for their philanthropy. The anti-slavery movement there was not an anti-church movement for the reason that the church took its full share in prosecuting that movement. And the anti-slavery movement in this country will cease to be an anti-church movement when the church of this country shall assume a favorable instead or a hostile position towards that movement. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad, honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. Boom. All right, let me repeat that again. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna have to do a little something for that one, because that one was so fire. That was so fire. Let me see. Where we at? You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad, honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. Interjection sounds familiar? Let's go. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever sustained the character of a nation. A system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty. You shed tears over fallen Hungary. All right. You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against her oppressors. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse. Interjection. Okay. Is it me? I don't know. I mean, kind of sounds like Ukraine situation with Black American descendants. Has anything changed? Interjection. Anyway, I digress. Let's continue. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland. but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. Man, this brother is dropping gems. All right, let's continue. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-hearing farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another, yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred. All men whose skins are not colored like your own. You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet, you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, quote, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, end quote. A seventh part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Oh, be warned, be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever. Frederick Douglass, bars. Let's continue. But it is answered in reply to all this that precisely what I have now denounced is in fact guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers stooped, basely stooped, to palter with us in a double sense and keep the word of promise to the ear, but break it to the heart. And instead of being the honest men I have before declared them to be, they were the various impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness on the farmers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe. There is not time now to argue the constitutional question at length, nor have I the ability to discuss it as it ought to be discussed. The subject has been handled with masterly power by Lysander Spooner, Esquire, by William Goodall, by Samuel E. Sewell, Esquire, and last, though not least, by Garrett Smith, Esquire. These gentlemen have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour. Fellow citizens, there is no matter in respect to which the people of the North have allowed themselves to be so ruinously imposed upon as that of the pro-slavery character of the Constitution. In that instrument, I hold there is neither warrant, license, nor sanction of the hateful thing, but interpreted as it ought to be interpreted. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document. Read its preamble, consider its purposes. Is slavery among them? Is it at the gateway? Or is it in the temple? It is neither. While I do not intend to argue this question on the present occasion, let me ask if it be not somewhat singular that if the Constitution were intended to be by its farmers and adopters a slave-holding instrument, why neither slavery, slaveholding, nor slave can anywhere be found in it? What would be thought of an instrument legally drawn up, for the purpose of entitling the city of Rochester to a tract of land in which no mention of land was made? Now, there are certain rules of the interpretation for the proper understanding of all legal instruments. These rules are well established. They are plain common sense rules such as you and I and all of us can understand and apply without having passed years in the study of law. I scout the idea that the question of the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of slavery is not a question for the people. I hold that every American citizen has a fight to form an opinion of the Constitution and to propagate that opinion and to use all honorable means to make his opinion the prevailing one. Without this fight, the liberty of an American citizen would be as insecure as that of a Frenchman. Ex-Vice President Dallas tells us that the Constitution is an object to which no American mind can be too attentive and no American heart too devoted. He further says the Constitution in its words is plain and intelligible and is meant for the homebred, unsophisticated understandings of our fellow citizens. Senator Berrien tells us that the Constitution is the fundamental law, that which controls all others. The character of our liberties, which every citizen has a personal interest in understanding thoroughly. The testimony of Senator Breeze, Lewis Cass, and many others that might be named, who are everywhere esteemed as sound lawyers, so regard the Constitution. I take it, therefore, that it is not presumption in a private citizen to form an opinion of that instrument. Now, take the Constitution according to its plain reading, and I defy the presentation of a single pro-slavery clause in it. On the other hand, it will be found to contain principles and purposes entirely hostile to the existence of slavery. I have detained my audience entirely too long already. At some future period, I will gladly avail myself of an opportunity to give this subject a full and fair discussion. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done. Long established customs of hurtful character could formally fence themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on its mental darkness. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce was born away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. It makes its pathway over and under the sea as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. The far-off and almost fabulous Pacific rolls in a grandeur at our feet. The celestial empire, the mystery of ages, is being solved. The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outrage, whether in taste, sport, or avarice, can now hide itself from the all-pervading light. The iron shoe and crippled foot of China must be seen in contrast with nature. Africa must rise and put on her yet unwoven garment. Ethiopia shall stretch out her hand unto God. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. Godspeed the year of Jubilee, the wide world o'er, when from their galling chains set free, the oppressed shall vilely bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny like brutes no more. That year will come and freedom's reign, to man his plundered fights again restore. Godspeed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, in every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. Godspeed the hour, the glorious hour, when none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor in a tyrant's presence cower, but all to manhood's stature tower. By equal birth, the hour will come, to each to all, and from this prison house the thrall go forth. Until that year, day, hour, arrive with head and heart, in hand I'll strive to break the rod and rend the give, the spoiler of the prey deprive. So witness heaven, and never from my chosen post, whate'er the peril or the cost, be driven. Wow. All right, let me take a quick break here. I'm gonna get into some other things. Let me go. I know, right, fam? That's facts, man. Facts. I'm just gonna go through a couple of these comments, and then I'm gonna get into I'll probably do the slate. No, let's go to the Whig Party, and then I'll do the Fugitive Slave Act. All right, you know what? I'll read the comments at the end, and then I'll let's see. Let's share this tab. Okay. Go back to the screen. Let me blow it up so the family can see it. Man, shout out to Frederick Douglass, man. That dude was so fire, man. Like, so many nuggets was in that speech. So many gems. I mean, everybody needs to read this speech, you know, especially because, like, I'm gonna go off a little tangent here. You know, there's this whole concept that, you know, black people, people of African descent, there was no slave ships. He just told you that the slave ships were there, like he witnessed them. There was no slavery. All right, let's go. This is from the Yale Law School. Let's read the Fugitive Slave Act. Just want to make sure that it's blown up enough on my screen. Okay, cool. Thanks once again for joining, family. Really appreciate you on this day. Please like, share, and subscribe. Share out to those who are listening live and who will get it on the replay, because I believe this is some information that we need to know. All right, here we go. Fugitive Slave Act 1850, Section 1. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that the persons who have been or may hereafter be appointed commissioners in virtue of any act of Congress by the circuit courts of the United States, and who, in consequence of such appointment, are authorized to exercise the powers that any justice of the peace or other magistrate of any of the United States may exercise in respect to offenders for any crime or offense against the United States, by arresting, imprisoning, or bailing the same under and by the virtue of the 33rd section of the Act of the 24th of September 1789, entitled, quote, "An act to establish the judicial courts of the United States," end quote, shall be and are hereby authorized and required to exercise and discharge all the powers and duties conferred by this act. Section 2. And be it further enacted that the Superior Court of each organized territory of the United States shall have the same power to appoint commissioners, to take acknowledgments of bail and affidavits, and to take dispositions of witnesses in civil causes, which is now possessed by the Circuit Court of the United States, and commissioners who shall hereafter be appointed for such purposes by the Superior Court of any organized territory of the United States shall possess all the powers and exercise all the duties conferred by law upon the commissioners appointed by the Circuit Courts of the United States for similar purposes, and shall, moreover, exercise and discharge all the powers and duties conferred by this act. Section 3. And be it further enacted that the Circuit Courts of the United States shall from time to time enlarge the number of the commissioners with a view to afford reasonable facilities to reclaim fugitives from labor and to attempt to prompt discharge of the duties imposed by this act. Section 4. And be it further enacted that the commissioners have named shall have concurrent jurisdiction with the judges of the circuit and district courts of the United States in the respective circuits and districts within the several states, and the judges of the superior courts of the territories, severally and collectively, in term, time, and vacation, shall grant certificates to such claimants, upon satisfactory proof being made, with authority to take and remove such fugitives from service or labor under the restrictions herein contained, to the state or territory from which such persons may have escaped or fled. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. With authority to take and remove such fugitives from service or labor under the restrictions herein contained, to the state or territory from which such persons may have escaped or fled. Section 5. And be it further enacted that it shall be the duty of all marshals and deputy marshals to obey and execute all warrants and precepts issued under the provisions of this act, when to them directed. And should any marshal or deputy marshal refuse to receive such warrant or other process when tendered, or to use all proper means diligently to execute the same, he shall, on conviction thereof, be fined in the sum of $1,000 to use of such claimant, on the motion of such claimant by the circuit or district court for the district of such marshal, and after arrest of such fugitive by such marshal or his deputy, or whilst any time in his custody under the provisions of this act, should such fugitive escape, whether with or without the assent of such marshal or his deputy, such marshal shall be liable on his official bond to be prosecuted for the benefit of such claimant for the full value of the service or labor of said fugitive in the state, territory, or district whence he escaped, and the better to enable the said commissioners, when thus appointed, to execute their duties faithfully and efficiently in conformity with the requirements of the Constitution of the United States and of this act. They are hereby authorized and empowered within their counties respectively to appoint in writing under their hands any one or more suitable persons from time to time to execute all such warrants and other process as may be issued by them in the lawful performance of their respective duties, with authority to such commissioners or the persons to be appointed by them to execute process as aforesaid, to summon and call to their aid the bystanders or posse comitatus of their proper county, when necessary, to ensure a faithful observance of the clause of the Constitution referred to in conformity with the provisions of this act. And all good citizens are hereby commanded to aid and assist in the prompt and efficient execution of this law, whenever their services may be required as aforesaid for that purpose, and said warrants shall run and be executed by said officers anywhere in the state within which they are issued. Let's see here. Let me see how many sections are going. Okay, a couple more paragraphs. Section 6. And be it further enacted that when a person held to service or labor in any state or territory of the United States has heretofore or shall hereafter escape into another state or territory of the United States, the person or persons to whom such service or labor may be due, or his, her, or their agent or attorney duly authorized by power of attorney in writing, acknowledged, and certified under the seal of some legal officer or court of the state or territory in which the same may be executed, may pursue and reclaim such fugitive person, either by procuring a warrant from some one of the courts, judges, or commissioners aforesaid of the proper circuit, district, or county for the apprehension of such fugitive from service or labor, or by seizing and arresting such fugitive, where the same can be done without process, and by taking or causing such person to be taken forthwith before such court, judge, or commissioner, whose duty it shall be to hear and determine the case of such claimant in a summary manner, and upon satisfactory proof being made by deposition or affidavit in writing to be taken and certified by such court, judge, or commissioner, or by other satisfactory testimony duly taken and certified by some court, magistrate, justice of the peace, or other legal officer authorized to administer an oath and to take depositions under the laws of the state or territory from which such persons owing service or labor may have escaped, with a certificate of such magistracy or other authority as aforesaid, with the seal of the proper court or officer thereto attached, which seal shall be sufficient to establish the competency of the proof, and with proof also affidavit of the entity of the identity of the person whose service or labor is claimed to be due as aforesaid, that the person so arrested does in fact owe service or labor to the person or persons claiming him or her in the state or territory from which such fugitive may have escaped as aforesaid, and said person escaped to make out and deliver such claimant, his or her agent or attorney, a certificate setting forth the substantial facts as to the service or labor due from the such fugitive to the claimant, and of his or her escape from the state or territory in which he or she was arrested, with authorities to such claimant or his or her agent or attorney to such reasonable force and restraint as may be necessary under the circumstances of the case to take and remove such fugitive person back to the state or territory whence he or she may have escaped as aforesaid. In no trial or hearing under this act shall the testimony of such alleged fugitive be admitted in evidence, and the certificates in this and the first fourth section be mentioned shall be conclusive of the right of the person or persons in whose favor granted to remove such fugitive to the state or territory from which he escaped, and shall prevent all molestation of such person or persons by any process issued by any court, judge, magistrate, or any other person whomsoever. Section 7. And be it further enacted that any person who shall knowingly and willingly obstruct, hinder, or prevent such claimant, his agent or attorney, or any person or persons lawfully assisting him, her, or them from arresting such a fugitive from service or labor, either with or without process or aforesaid, or shall rescue or attempt to rescue such fugitive from service or labor from the custody of such claimant, his or her agent or attorney, or other person or persons lawfully assisting as aforesaid, when so arrested, pursuant to the authority herein given and declared, or shall aid, abet, or assist such persons who owing service or labor as aforesaid, directly or indirectly to escape from such claimant, his agent or attorney, or other person or persons legally authorized as aforesaid, or shall harbor or conceal such fugitive so as to prevent this discovery and to arrest of such person, after notice or knowledge of the fact that such person was a fugitive from service or labor as aforesaid, shall, for either of said offenses, be subject to a fine not exceeding $1,000 and imprisonment not exceeding 6 months, by indictment and conviction before the District Court of the United States for the district in which such offense may have been committed, or before the proper court of criminal jurisdiction, if committed with any one of the organized territories of the United States, and shall moreover forfeit and pay by way of civil damages to the party injured by such illegal conduct the sum of $1,000 for each fugitive so lost as aforesaid, to be recovered by action of debt in any of the district or territorial courts aforesaid within whose jurisdiction the said offense may have committed. All right. Section 8. And to be further enacted that the marshals, their deputies, and the clerks of the said district and territorial courts shall be paid for their services, the like fees as may be allowed for similar services in other cases, and where such services are rendered exclusively in the arrest, custody, and delivery of the fugitive to the claimant, his or her agent or attorney, or where such supposed fugitive may be discharged out of custody for the want of sufficient proof as aforesaid, then such fees are to be paid in whole by such claimant, his or her agent or attorney, and in all cases where the proceedings are before a commissioner, he shall be entitled to a fee of $10 in full for his services in each case, upon the delivery of the said certificate to the claimant, his agent or attorney, or a fee of $5 in cases where the proof shall not, in the opinion of such commissioner, warrant such certificate and delivery, inclusive of all services incident to such arrest and examination, to be paid in either case by the claimant, his or her agent or attorney, the person or persons authorized to execute the process to be issued by such commissioner for the arrest and detention of fugitives from service or labor as aforesaid, shall also be entitled to a fee of $5 each for each person he or they may arrest and take before any commissioner as aforesaid, at the instance and request of such claimant, with such other fees as may be deemed reasonable by such commissioner for such other additional services as may be necessarily performed by him or them, such as attending at the examination, keeping the fugitive in custody, and providing him with food and lodging during his detention, and until the final determination of such commissioners, and in general for performing such other duties as may be required by such claimant, his or her attorney or agent or commissioner in the premises, such fees to be paid up in conformity with the fees usually charged by the officers of the courts of justice within the proper district or county, as near as may be practicable, and paid by such claimants, their agents or attorneys, whether such supposed fugitives from service or labor be ordered to be delivered to such claimant by the final determination of such commissioner or not. All right, I'm gonna write this section down real quick. I'm gonna take a quick pause because I think this is section 8 is important, or I mean the whole document's actually important, but they're actually giving numbers here, so I'd be curious if we spoke to somebody like Dr. Sandy Darity or Professor Kramer to see what numbers we can calculate for these fees that were enacted within this law, just to kind of see what the today's amount might be. I mean, somebody already might know that number, but I don't know off the top of my head, and right now not doing the calculation. But if somebody in the chat knows it, please put it in there. All right, let's do it. Section 9. And be it further enacted that upon affidavit made by the claimant of such fugitive, his agent or attorneys, after such certificate has been issued, that he has reason to apprehend that such fugitive will be rescued by force from his or her possession before he can be taken beyond the limits of the state in which the arrest is made. It shall be the duty of the officer making the arrest to retain such fugitive in his custody and to remove him to the state whence he fled, and there to be delivered him to said claimant, his agent or attorney. And to this end, the officer aforesaid is hereby authorized and required to employ so many persons as he may deem necessary to overcome such force and to retain them in his service so long as circumstances may require. The said officer and his assistants, while so employed, to receive the same compensation and to be allowed the same expenses as are now allowed by law for transportation of criminals, to be certified by the judge of the district within which the arrest is made and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. Okay, let's put a pin in that one. It said that the said officer and his assistants, while so employed, to receive the same compensation and to be allowed the same expenses as are now allowed by the law for transportation of criminals, to be certified by the judge of the district which the arrest is made and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. Paid out of the Treasury of the United States. Section 9. Last section 10. And be it further enacted that when any person held to service or labor in any state or territory or in the District of Columbia shall escape there from the party to whom such service or labor shall be due, his, her, or their agent or attorney may apply to any court of record therein, or judge thereof in vacation, and make satisfactory proof to such court or judge in vacation of the escape aforesaid, in that the person escaping owed service or labor to such party. Whereupon the court shall cause a record to be made of the matter so proved, and also a general description of the person so escaping, with such convenient certainty as may be, and a transcript of such record, authenticated by the attestation of the clerk and of the seal of the said court, being produced in any other state, territory, or district in which the person so escaping may be found, and being exhibited to any judge, commissioner, or other office authorized by the law of the United States to cause persons escaping from service or labor to be delivered up, shall be held and taken to full and conclusive evidence of the fact of escape, and that the service or labor of the person escaping is due to the party in such record mentioned. And upon the production by the said party of other and other and further evidence if necessary, either oral or by affidavit. Either oral or by affidavit. Anyway, I just had to repeat that one. Let's keep going. In addition to what is contained in the said record of the entity of the person escaping, he or she shall be delivered up to the claimant, and the said court, commissioner, judge, or other person authorized by this act to grant certificates to claimants or fugitives shall, upon the production of the record and other evidences aforesaid, grant to such claimant a certificate of his right to take any such person identified and proved to be owning service or labor as aforesaid, which certificate shall authorize such claimant to seize or arrest and transport such person to the state or territory from which he escaped, provided that nothing herein contained shall be construed as required the production of a transcript of such record as evidence as aforesaid, but in its absence the claim shall be heard and determined upon other satisfactory proofs competent in law. Approved September 18th, 1850. Once again, that was approved September 18th, 1850. Whew. My gosh. So yeah, I think hopefully I'm gonna try to reach out to an economist to get them on the platform so we can, get educated and get some numbers going on. All right, thanks for tuning in. We're gonna have one more reading here. I'm gonna pull up some slides here. Thanks for joining. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let's see here. We're gonna go on. Who was at the time the president and what party he was affiliated? Let's see. So yes, at the time it was Millard Fillmore, President Millard Fillmore of the Whig Party. Okay, so let's do a little history on the 13th president of the United States. Each measure obtained a majority, and by September 20th, President Fillmore had signed them into law. Webster wrote, "I can now sleep of nights." Some of the more militant Northern Whigs remained irreconcilable, refusing to forgive. Oh, I'm sorry, man, I'm tripping. My bad. Let's do this right. Let's do this right, because I'm doing it all wrong. All right. So we're gonna go with my bad. All right, here we go. Let's do it. Millard Fillmore, a member of the Whig Party, was the 13th president of the United States, 1850 to 1853, and the last president not to be affiliated with either the Democratic or Republican parties. In his rise from a log cabin to wealth in the White House, Millard Fillmore demonstrated that through methodical industry and some competence, an uninspiring man could make the American dream come true. Born in the Finger Lakes country of New York in 1800, Fillmore as a youth endured the privations of frontier life. He worked on his father's farm and at 15 was apprenticed to a cloth dresser. He attended one-room schools and fell in love with the red-headed teacher, Abigail Powers, who later became his wife. In 1823, he was admitted to the bar. 7 years later, he moved his law practice to Buffalo as an associate of the Whig politician Thurlow Weed. Fillmore held state office and for 8 years was a member of the House of Representatives. In 1848, while Comptroller of New York, he was elected vice president. Fillmore presided over the Senate during the months of nerve-wracking debates over the Compromise of 1850. He made no public comment on the merits of the compromise proposals, but a few days before President Taylor's death, he intimated to him that if there should be a tie vote on Henry Clay's bill, he would vote in favor of it. Thus, the sudden accession of Fillmore to the presidency in July 1850 brought an abrupt political shift in the administration. Taylor's cabinet resigned, and President Fillmore at once appointed Daniel Webster to be Secretary of State, thus proclaiming his alliance with the moderate Whigs who favored the compromise. A bill to admit California still aroused all the violent arguments for and against the extension of slavery, without any progress towards settling the major issues. Clay, exhausted, left Washington to recuperate, throwing leadership upon Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois. At this critical juncture, President Fillmore announced in favor of the compromise on August 6, 1850. He sent a message to Congress recommending that Texas be paid to abandon her claims to be part of New Mexico. This helped influence a critical number of Northern Whigs in Congress away from the insistence upon the Wilmot Proviso, the stipulation that all land gained by the Mexican War must be closed to slavery. Douglas's effective strategy in Congress, combined with Fillmore's pressure from the White House to give impetus to the compromise movement, breaking up Clay's single legislative package, Douglas presented 5 separate bills to the Senate. 1. Admit California as a free state. 2. Settle the Texas boundary and compensate her. 3. Grant territorial status to Mexico. 4. Place federal officers at the disposal of slaveholders seeking fugitives. 5. Abolish the slave trade in the District of Columbia. Each measure obtained a majority, and by September 20, President Fillmore had signed them into law. Webster wrote, "I can now sleep at night of nights." Some of the more militant Northern Whigs remained irreconcilable. Yeah. Some of the more militant Northern Whigs remained irreconcilable, refusing to forgive Fillmore for having signed the Fugitive Slave Act. I'm going to repeat. He signed the Fugitive Slave Act. Some of the more militant Northern Whigs remained irreconcilable, refusing to forgive Fillmore for having signed the Fugitive Slave Act. They helped deprive him of the presidential nomination in 1852. Within a few years, it was apparent that although the compromise had been intended to settle the slavery controversy, it served rather as an uneasy sectional truce. As the Whig Party disintegrated in the 1850s, Fillmore refused to join the Republican Party, but instead in 1856 accepted the nomination for president of the Know Nothing or American Party. Throughout the Civil War, he opposed President Lincoln and during Reconstruction supported President Johnson. He died in 1874. I'm going to repeat that again, ladies and gentlemen. As the Whig Party disintegrated in the 1850s, Fillmore refused to join the Republican Party, but instead in 1856 accepted the nomination for president of the Know Nothing or American Party. Throughout the Civil War, he opposed President Lincoln and during Reconstruction supported President Johnson. He died in 1874. Okay, let me just share one more thing here. Let's see. Here. I'm just going to look this stuff up real quick. Let's see. And then appreciate y'all's patience. Just want to read you something real quick about Let's see. Okay. Let me take that off. All right. So I just want to read you what the Whig Party was about when it started. It's according to Wikipedia. All right, the Whig Party was a conservative political party that existed in the United States during the mid-19th century. Alongside the slightly larger Democratic Party, it was one of the two major parties in the United States between the late 1830s and the early 1850s as part of the second party system. 4 presidents were affiliated with the Whig Party for at least part of their terms. Other prominent members of the Whig Party include Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, Rufus Choate, William Seward, John J. Crittenden, and John Quincy Adams. The Whig base of support was centered among entrepreneurs, professionals, planters, social reformers, devout Protestants, particularly evangelicals, and emerging urban middle class. It had much less backing from poor farmers and unskilled workers. The party was hostile towards manifest destiny, interesting, territorial expansion into Texas and the Southwest, and the Mexican-American War. It disliked strong presidential power as exhibited by Jackson and Polk, and preferred congressional dominance in lawmaking. Members advocated modernization, meritocracy, the rule of law, protections against majority tyranny, and vigilance against executive tyranny. They favored an economic program known as the American System, which called for a protective tariff, federal subsidies for the construction of infrastructure, and support for a national bank. The party was active in both the northern United States and the southern United States, and did not take a strong stance on slavery. But northern Whigs tended to be less supportive than their Democratic counterparts. The Whigs emerged in the 1830s in opposition to President Andrew Jackson, pulling together former members of the National Republican Party, the anti-Masonic Party, and disaffected Democrats. Okay, if you guys want to read more information on the Whig Party, you can look that up. I just wanted to really just get to the point on their stance with slavery. It said the party was active, I'm just repeat it one more time. The party was active in both the northern United States and the southern United States and did not take a strong stance on slavery. So I guess they were meh on it either way. But northern Whigs tended to be less supportive than their Democratic counterparts. All right. Whew. Man, got through that one. Man, okay, let me go through some of these comments and we'll go ahead and close it out. So first of all, please like, share, subscribe. Thank you very much. Shout out to the family going on. B1 in the building. Salutations, family. All right, let's see what else is in here. Okay, you never know the full impact you are making. Cause appreciate you, Black. And you too, brother, man. We got to get you on the program, bro. Cause you sound like you got some knowledge and information, man, to share with the public. This is a community platform. I appreciate y'all. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go through some of these. Yes. Shout out to our good sister and associate producer, Darlene Crony. Yes, you can actually find it at TB Tubi. Did I say TV Tubi? TV Tubi. Yes, you can go on. Reparations Now. It's in that link. Check it out. Yeah. All right. Let's see what's going on here. In the building, Chris L. doing major work. Reparations advocate himself in the building. Yeah, ain't that the truth? The more things stay the same, the more things stay the same. All this time and nothing has changed, man. That's facts. Queen Yasmin, what's up, sis? Thanks for coming through. We appreciate you. Queen Yasmin was in the building the other day after the meetup of the California Reparations Task Force hearing. Thank you for coming through. Shout out to all our family. Hey, I had a great conversation. If you haven't yet seen the interview I did with our good brother Reggie Romaine in the building, gave us some insight. So that was a good insight. Yeah, Douglas didn't give it. Yeah, unlike our leaders and politicians today, he ain't care about life. Yeah, that is true. As our good Angela Nirvana says, tell like a TI is. We just gotta, just start telling the truth, what it is, and not be afraid. This is really about justice. People want to talk about color this and color that, and yes, I mean this is racialized, and it is an issue towards certain, people who have our so-called melanin skin tone, right? But still, there's a legacy and a lineage that, a group of people have been subjugated to. As a matter of fact, I don't know how I came on this YouTube video, but the sister was talking about, how, I guess, black women need to get married or whatever. And I mean, it just always gets back down to slavery in this country. I don't know why people just don't want to just say it, right? All the harms that have happened to the black family, to black people, is because of slavery. And nobody wants to say that. She went on and said, well, black men, are having, issues, trying to find work, trying to find a job. And by the time they're able to get, financial stability, they're older, women are older. Black women are doing thing in their career. And I'm like, the whole time, the sister's not talking about enslavement, not talking about slavery, not talking about reparations. I don't understand what these people, they always talking about what's wrong with the black man or wrong with the black woman, but doesn't go to the core of it. Anyway. All right, yep, fire. There's no slavery, that's right. Thank you, fam. I appreciate all y'all, man. Woo, this has been an interesting journey. We got to keep going with it. I mean, we're not done. I need to get with my production partner one of these days. And figure out what we're going to do with this next bit of information that's coming up. I think I'm going to call it the Path to Reparations, California style. But yeah, we're going to soon get into that, because I think we need to really figure out who's doing what, strategize with the family, with the people, get some feedback, see if we're headed in the right direction. But anyway, family, so appreciate you taking the time to listen, to keep yourself informed, and to keep yourself aware. As Dr. Shirley Weber said, and I'm paraphrasing at the last California Reparations Task Force hearing, said that, you have to read. You have to keep yourself educated. And that's why, I read on this program. I do read, outside as well of this platform. But I think it's important, to actually read this aloud. Because sometimes we absorb things just reading silently. I mean, that's good, and we could take notes, but this is a great educational piece. Let's see. The core of it always been white dollars and who getting it. Yeah, that's facts. That is facts. That is true. Wealth and economic progress has always been solidified, predominantly, with white elitists, in this country. Don't even know what else to say about that one, brother, but facts. Yeah, it does, man. I mean, we gotta understand that, and it does put an atmosphere that, oftentimes we'll just, we're thinking that we're kind of wasting time, but, I think most importantly, or in addition, are the young folks, right? Because we need to just keep passing down this information. I had the opportunity to finally speak with my nephew and my son, and we were actually talking about reparations, particularly here in California, and it's just interesting how individuals speak about things and make presumptions about things instead of just reading it and taking the information and then saying, okay, this is what's being presented, right? And not having any, other thoughts about what's going on, but saying, okay, this is what the facts and this is what we're dealing with. So it was very interesting build. So, just keep understanding, give this information, some time to digest in your system. Go back, take notes. And because at the end of the day, this information is presenting itself. I see all this information as like education, and you're about to go into the court of law. And what information do you have to present your case? And so anytime that, I come across some information, or if there's anything that anybody comes across, shoot us an email at etnmediagroup@gmail.com. Everything is important. I mean, even the minuscule thing that you think isn't important is very important. In the beginning was the word. We have to keep using our word. It's a step between thought and action. Yeah, that's facts. That is facts. Well, family, once again, thank you for your time. As always, peace and reparations. If you have to go back, listen to this, audio file, go ahead and do so, or video. Or, reread it yourself, because he was throwing in some gems, some jewels at what was happening at that time. So, we can refute. I mean, that's a living testimony speech right there on what was happening around that time. All right, family, on that note, once again, be safe if you're going to celebrate fireworks or go out, have some barbecue or whatever y'all do. Please be safe. And yes, it's okay to celebrate, quote unquote, Independence Day here in America. Even though, we haven't been repaired yet. I mean, that's totally up to you. I mean, I don't, celebrate it like that. But if you do, please be safe. Because it is a day for celebration. We fought in every single war. Appreciate you, Black Magic Mike. You too, brother. We fought in every war, contributed heavily, built this country on the back of our ancestors, and still contribute building to this country. And once we get these reparations, we're going to do good things. It's not even a matter of if and when. I know there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of negative energy, negative thoughts, a lot of tropes talking about what Black Americans and the descendants of enslaved people are going to do and not going to do, with our reparations, not only here in California, but on the federal level. start creating some plans. Let's start creating some plans right now. Let's be more progressive in our ideology and thought, because so many people are negative out there. All right. Once again, take care. Love y'all. Be safe and rest up. Enjoy your day, because the fight for reparations continues. All right, family, on that note, peace and reparations.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the Descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, and no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.